So this past week, David Bowie passed away, and I haven't really had much time to think about his passing. But CJ, you have been ruminating about it a little bit.
Yeah,
and so I wanted to give you a platform to talk a little bit about it, and I'll just ask you some follow-up questions about it.
Sure. No. I'm just curious, at least in the sense that it seems everybody, all the obituaries I've seen, at least how people talk about him, it seems that David Bowie, his crowning virtue at least is his chameleon-like nature, how he can change every year or so, and he has a new style, he has a new genre, and all this stuff. And I'm just curious about this fact that everybody's like, oh yeah, he's changing, and that's so great, and how that is just the way, that is what people like about him. And I'm just curious about that aspect of this chameleon-like nature. Why do we like it so much? What in art or in philosophy is that related to? Because I almost think of this idea of being, I don't know how to describe it, but consistency, I guess. I think we do admire consistency in a work. Or like, okay, the guy's progressing and he's getting better and better and better. But with somebody like David Bowie, it's just kind of, all these dots are kind of just going everywhere. So I'm just curious, at least about that kind of trajectory and maybe how it relates. Because I don't really see it as something that's linear. And I'm just wondering if that maybe says something about artistic development, or even human development too, whether we are supposed to almost like like this German, was it Bildungsroman, where it's just like it goes, we're just going to keep going forward until we become an adult or become a man, or whether it is this sort of just A to C to B to Z back to J, and this weird kind of trajectory.
Well, a lot of things come to mind. So I have no notes prepared or anything like that.
No, I don't either.
So a couple streams of thought come to mind.
Okay.
All right. So there are lots of artists who cosmetically change what they are, their sound, their appearance, and things like that. But we don't necessarily bestow the same sort of fanatical fanfare upon them that we did to David Bowie. So when I think about people who are constantly changing up their appearance or things like that, like I think of individuals like Madonna. Or I think of individuals like Lady Gaga, or maybe even Miley Cyrus or something like that. But we don't seem to have, maybe Madonna at one point, but we don't seem to have the same esteem for them. Now, they're also women, so maybe they suffer from some sort of bias that David Bowie didn't have to suffer from. So the fact that the constant change thing is not necessarily a sign of artistic greatness. So there's got to be something else.
Which is interesting,
that accounts for the artistic greatness. So I would also be contentious to the point that at a certain point, I wonder if David Bowie really was a chameleon. At a certain point, it seemed like the chameleon nature of David Bowie became arrested. In a sense, like, I think of the pre-Ziggy Stardust days where he was kind of, being manufactured by record labels. And then I think of Ziggy Stardust, and then I think of the Diamond Dog era and the Thin White Duke, and like the collaborative stuff he did, like with like Scary Monsters and Nine Inch Nails, and later on in life with Arcade Fire and stuff like that. It seemed like somewhere around the 90s, and I haven't really followed his career all that much. I don't really think about David Bowie all that much, but it seemed like at some point in the 90s he just became David Bowie. But there was like a 15 or 20 year period where he seemed to be changing it up all the time. So there's lots of change. Then I'd say, like, I don't know, 95 on, he seemed to just be David Bowie.
Well, that's a very fascinating point.
Do I have this narrative wrong?
No. I think that's a fascinating point. I've read a lot about late periods of musicians, even too, like a Beethoven or a Bach or something like that. And there is at least a consensus among writers that I've seen where they talk about an idea that for the late period, it seems that there's a lot of, obviously, looking back, as much as there is in our later lives, how we contemplate our past. They've contemplated everything that they've done, and that a lot of late period works like Beethoven, he uses fugue and all these earlier forms, and how Bach, in some of his organ variations and Art of Fugue and Musical Offering, how it's all this early canon like material, fugue material, stuff that he did way back or so, or just stuff that was even before him, that it's almost looking back, it's not really so much that they're contradicting themselves and that this late period's crazy, but that it's just they're just looking, it's almost, it is reflective as much as it is forward looking. So maybe David Bowie, I agree in a sense that he is kind of looking back, because like you're saying, it's almost like he's put on so many hats and now he's just kind of looking back at the hats he's worn, in a sense.
I will say that when he was his most chameleon-like is when I enjoyed his music the most. It's not, I've listened to 90s on David Bowie, and his music is not bad.
No.
It's still really good. It's David Bowie. It's still Bowie's voice and his aesthetic and everything like that. But I would say that his most fertile creative period occurred when he was changing up his personality the most. So an interesting question I think would be to ask is, what is one's cosmetic change? Are one's cosmetic changes necessarily going to lead to internal creativity as well? And when he kind of when he entered that more sort of retrospective Bowie, if that's what he was, I don't know. I'm not
I don't know
biographer. But if he did enter sort of a retrospective, like looking back on his career, 95 on or whatever, and he kind of just kept churning out the same sort of Bowie material, if he had kind of kept changing it up, would he have made more impactful music during the time? Like, I don't know if I can name any Bowie songs after 95.
Yeah.
I mean, I know some of the projects he did, but I could probably name 30 Bowie songs between 69 and 90. You know? It seemed like all the great stuff came when he was changing it up so much. So that's an interesting question, though. But then there are a lot of people who just do the cosmetic change, and the internal creative thing doesn't necessarily follow. Like, I think about all the sort of people who've tried to reinvent themselves and like totally fallen flat on their face. Like, I'm trying to think what would be a good example of that. Like, I don't want to. The first example that came to mind was like Garth Brooks and his like Chris Gaines character when he tried to create his own sort of Ziggy Stardust or whatever. But I can't really speak to the music because I'm not really acquainted with this music, so I'm totally uninformed.
No,
but there are lots of people that go through these cosmetic changes but don't experience the same sort of creative.
And maybe that's where people admire David Bowie, is that he's had these changes. And I think also another topic, or at least within this, is the idea of appropriation and of taking certain styles or certain idioms and either A, just taking advantage of them, or B, making them your own in some kind of amalgamation, if I said that word right, but amalgamation. So yeah, amalgamation. But I think that's where people, or at least other artists, admire him, in the sense that even though he is changing, he is taking these things, respecting them, almost like, taking a cup and saying like, okay, I'm not going to just like take advantage of this cup, but I'm going to use it I'm going to respect the cup as a cup. I'm going to use it, and I'm going to put it back, but still give credit to the cup.
Right, he's going to fully become the cup.
But he's not appropriating it, like a, I don't know, Indian headdress.
It's not like the Sonny and Cher Variety Hour where like, hey, let's do a hippie skit.
Right, exactly.
He's fully committed to the character. So maybe the difference would be like sort of maybe if we spoke of it in terms of acting, perhaps the difference between someone who does like method acting versus like someone who's just playing like a character or whatever. Right. So like, someone who fully becomes invested in this alternate persona versus like just trying on the costume.
Right.
So it would seem like, and I think we're getting to maybe a truth of Bowie here, is that when he was artistically great in his shape-shifting is when he was essentially method acting. When he was essentially becoming the cup or becoming Ziggy Stardust or the Thin White Duke or whatever else, when he was becoming that thing rather than just ceremonially trying the persona on, that's what kind of sort of created the force within. You've seen this with like other celebrities and stuff like that. I think of like Matthew McConaughey, right? Like he was a punchline for a long time as an actor because like he was just like, a hot dude who like ran around with his shirt off and like played a hippie or played like I don't know what the fuck he did, but he did stuff.
Hippie,
I mean, but then when he like fully committed to roles like in True Detective or whatever, he experienced a creative renaissance. So maybe that's the difference, and it's being singularly devoted to a particular persona.
And it did like really damage him there, like it's when he committed to Ziggy Stardust, his whole drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all that stuff. So there is.
So I don't know anything about it. So I don't know what the psychological effects.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
only
right. Exactly. So I guess there is a price to pay with that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think that is maybe a difference, at least if we're trying to say, okay, so what makes him so great? If oh well, everybody changes, blah blah blah. But what made his chameleon-like nature so heralded? Yeah.
So I think we've gotten to the quintessence of what made where he drew creative inspiration from that shape-shifting. Mm-hmm. I think the question that I have now is, you keep saying he's the greatest at it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, do I say he's the
greatest? Or you said something, you're qualifying it to the extent that he was maybe perhaps really great at it. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned some other individuals earlier, like Madonna or something like that, who's also known for their chameleon-like character. But I guess the question is, like, has there been anyone else who's really been chameleon-like him? And
Shakespeare, maybe?
No. I'm going to be deferential to that because I don't know Shakespeare's.
No, I don't know. Well, I know him a little bit, but I was actually reading this really interesting lecture by Jorge Luis Borges. Are you familiar with him?
A little
author,
bit.
Yeah, no, it's cool because he talks about the idea that what makes Shakespeare so great is that there isn't really just one, like, a Byronic hero. How we have, like, oh, well, Lord Byron, he has this one hero, or, oh, this one author has this one guy, or this one character type. Where Shakespeare, it's almost like when, I guess the one quote that I really stuck to is, when you think of Shakespeare, you think of the crowd. Where he doesn't really focus so much on a certain type of person, but he focuses on all kind of people. So he doesn't necessarily, it's not always about Hamlet. There's also, or
which I have a personal affection.
Sure. Oh no, of course. No, I'm saying. I
love Gloomy Danes.
Oh sure, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's not just Gloomy Danes. There's also Falstaff, or all the other characters as well have the same kind of. Same kind of time and effort and artistry.
So you think that's what Shakespeare was doing? Is Shakespeare was essentially incarnating himself throughout all these different places.
That's what people say. Yeah.
Like in Hamlet, he is Hamlet, or King Lear, he's King Lear, and that's what made Shakespeare such a prolific and great playwright, was his ability to be a chameleon like Bowie.
Yeah.
So Bowie and Shakespeare are
sort of, and then some is kind of scary because then it's like you don't know who Shakespeare actually is.
Does it matter?
Oh yeah, does it matter? Exactly. Well, and that's why I guess where we talk about the idea of identity and whether that can be into play, or whether we are supposed to have a certain, well, I know who I am, but then I can have these certain. I mean, maybe that's again.
Do we really need to know the essential Bowie or the essential Shakespeare? All that we seem to really be able to get down to is we distill their similarities, is their ability to commit to the other, to commit to the crowd, to commit to people within the crowd, all the people that come on the stage in our life.
Yeah.
I'm interested. We got Bowie and Shakespeare.
Two English.
I mean, they are greats.
And it was just an interesting, at least reading about Shakespeare, reading about that was just really interesting. Where it's like, to think of Shakespeare is to think of the crowd, where you don't really think of Shakespeare in one character. You think of it in this whole crowd of characters. You think of the high King Lear, then you think of with low Falstaff, or the jokers and the jesters, and then you also can maybe even think of the harlots and the prostitutes. That they all, and poor and whatever in the middle. They all sort of.
You know who else did this?
Yeah.
Who else would have been in this circle of artists with Bowie and Shakespeare? Would have been Joyce.
Okay. Yeah.
Joyce's ability to get inside the minds of other individuals. I mean, I remember reading Ulysses, and there was such a nationalistic Irish obsession for Ireland to birth its own Shakespeare. Right. I think Joyce very much wanted to be Ireland's Shakespeare in order to distance themselves from England. And you see that in a book like Ulysses, especially during Molly Bloom's soliloquy.
Oh, sure.
Now, I can't make really a lot of heads or tails of
There's
Ulysses.
a lot of yes. There's a lot of yes in it.
But the final chapter of Ulysses, when he is in the mind of Molly Bloom, that is the most beautifully written thing I have ever heard. The first 9/10 of that book I could do without.
Yeah.
But I've said it before. The ending and how he gets inside the mind of a woman justifies the entire book.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, a lot of yes. That's what I remember. Yeah. But I think that's a really great.
But even how he gets inside the other characters.
Oh, sure.
But I guess so. We've got Shakespeare, Joyce, Bowie.
Yeah.
Who else in the contemporary scene might be in that circle?
And we don't even have to talk about music. Could be anything else.
Is there someone in film? We mentioned sort of McConaughey.
I don't really know. I mean,
a lot of people say Robin Williams was like that, and that might have been what caused his untimely demise.
Sure, but maybe that again is like something about a comedian. I don't know. The Pagliacci clown. Yeah, exactly, the whole Pagliacci thing. But it's like maybe Radiohead, maybe. Because they've had their sort of. I mean, I can at least think of from their younger stuff to like Kid A, where they just said okay.
They went from prog to Minimalist Glitch.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't. Where are they now?
They're sort of in a middle ground between all that. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but I mean.
Well, we're about to find out. I think they have a new record.
Are they? Okay, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, no, but that's what I can think of at least, like in the '90s, how they kind of just like went. I mean, I just think of that moment when they went to electronic, at least with Kid A, where it's just where's the distorted guitar, where's all this, where they got sick of, they just got sick of it and burnt out, and they said, we just want to do something different. This isn't really giving us any kind of satisfaction.
What do you think about jazz players?
Jazz players and the ability to change?
But they don't. I don't know if they have much of an identity to begin with. I mean,
right? Just because it's all in the moment.
It's always. It's not like do they ever inhabit a perspective long enough to change from. And it depends on the jazz artist you're talking about, right? Like, if you just come out like I don't know. Like I think about Sun Ra, right? Like. Like,
sure,
has he? I don't know his biography. Was he always like, I'm an Egyptian alien making crazy music, and I'm going to do that shtick for 30 years? Or was he like? Did he have like a traditional jazz period, and then he went and then he adopted this character?
I remember he did have. I think he was always Sun Ra, but I think he had more. Traditional, like we think of as jazz, even though it was still a little odd, but it was still at least traditional. And then it's sort of Miles Davis is a good example.
Miles Davis did this, right? Because he's gone through a number of permutations.
Oh, sure, goodness.
Yeah, so Miles Davis, you could say, did that.
John Coltrane too. I mean, he kind of went. At least he had his kind of traditional. What we think of traditional.
I would say Brian Eno.
Yeah,
I would put Eno.
You think so?
Well, not as a jazz musician.
Yeah. Not as a jazz musician,
but as a shape. Again, I think he went through a period where he was a shapeshifter, right? Where he went from glam to ambient, and then to like rock arena producer.
Sure.
I don't know where Eno is right now. I don't know if he's in that retrospective Bowie phase, but.
Yeah, this is all very interesting. At least how we're talking about this, because I don't think those musicians, or even other musicians we know, maybe ourselves included, would care about whether, what am I now? What am I today? What am I? What kind of genre shirt am I wearing? Where it almost seems like something that other people worry about, and those people just kind of do whatever they're interested in, and it doesn't exactly matter whether.
Yes and no, right?
Right.
Yes,
of course, you know at the history.
David Bowie had to be very conscious about certain aesthetic decisions he did. It wasn't like I think I'm going to go and do this thing now. Like, he had to be very calculated in the image I was going to make.
Oh, sure.
And I would say even the music that I'm making right now with you, like, I'm making a very conscious decision to exit pop production and to go into fusion, noise, ambient, immediate music. Like, I'm just like, to hell with production, up with immediacy. So
No, that makes sense.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm not really thinking about what the crowd thinks about me, because the crowd doesn't care about me. I've never been a successful musician. But I am making a very conscious decision to do something else. I'm still filming. Yeah, so...
That's a very good point. Yeah,
it's not all... It's not... There has to be a decision point. I don't think it's like totally organic, but if you let the crowd dictate what the aesthetic is going to be, then chances are you're not going to follow through on the character.
Right, and
he's
maybe
going to come
that's
through.
I mean, I think that's maybe where David Bowie at least gets a little credit, because it seems like he's
where Radiohead should get the credit too.
Yeah, exactly.
For
kind of making their own decisions. Yeah, and kind of. Well, that's another interesting thing too of getting a fan base and then kind of leading them.
The Beatles did this too.
Yeah.
When the Beatles went through their psychedelic phase and things like that, and they brushed off the boy band persona that they had and reinvented themselves, they did this as well. Yeah,
and even just taking the audience with them on that ride and maybe introducing them to something that they never really listened to. I think that's a really...
Is that what they're introducing us to? Are they just introducing us to new sounds, or are they introducing us to something more fundamental? Like you mentioned it, are they... Fundamental. Are Bowie, Shakespeare, Miles Davis, or whatever, it's all sound, right? Either in poetry or in music.
I'm sure it's
so they're introducing us to new combinations of sound. What's the significance of that? Why is that cool? Like, so cool. We get a song like Starman or
does it say
another
something?
Green World record or Idiotech or whatever. Why is that significant? I'm not sure the music itself is significant. It seems like
the process of becoming, like we were talking like a Nietzsche thing, like of becoming, how you're just kind of always in this.
I think they're showing us
stasis of, or maybe not stasis, but you're in this.
They're showing us something about. They're showing us something about the quintessential human spirit and identity. Now we don't really know how to put our fingers on it.
No.
But I'll tell you what, you know who could really speak to all of this, speak to the chameleon-like and the shape-shifting thing is someone that I've done work on, is Simone de Beauvoir.
Okay.
And just talking about, in order to make this absurd life that, in her view, is totally meaningless, meaningful, is to embark on these projects of becoming that open up new possibilities that were otherwise undreamt of.
Yeah.
And that this is ultimately how we experience anything like joy in this world. And that seems like a very simple notion.
Yeah.
But think about the things that we think are where we derive joy. From romantic partners, from children, from legacy, from money, from education. We think these things will bring us joy. And just about all of us know that that's a canard. Like, love will make us insane. Overeducation will give us the disease of the learned, as you would say. Money will... we all know the deleterious effects of money. Like, family will drive us up the wall. Like, all these things. But this ability to reimagine and reinvent ourselves and open up new worlds and disclose our being and becoming, like, this is where happiness and joy may actually really come into a secular perspective. You know, we haven't talked about religion at all, but because I don't think it's really relevant to any of this. But from de Beauvoir's perspective or to Bowie, but I think maybe Bowie and Shakespeare and all these people would be prototypes, or I should say archetypes of the ideal existential man on Simone de Beauvoir's perspective.
Okay.
I think
they're just constantly searching and being aware.
They are not slaves to unconditional value, and they redefine themselves in order to give their life new meaning. And when they do that, they demonstrate to the world the dignity of man. When they do that, they show to everyone else that though we are very frail, there is something, and de Beauvoir would never say these words, but there is something preternatural or divine or above the ceaseless flux of nature within man. When they do that, they distill a truth about ourselves that is otherwise obliterated by capitalism, communism, market economies, whatever.
Or just the fact by being a sentient being, I can't really know what you're thinking from, I can't really read your mind, but I can if you give me a book that you've read or something that's in like, yeah, this is what I'm feeling at the moment. I mean, I know Kafka talked about that too, how reading, or at least how art and like literature in his case is almost like an axe to pierce through the ice of the soul, where it's just where we have this divide, like you said, maybe where it is these things like family or all these and society and all these things but we need something to crack through and to kind of say like, yes, I understand you as another human being, or at least to get to the facts, not the facts, but just the nature of what it is to be human and to be a sentient and emotional and social being. I don't know, it's very fascinating.
Alright, I'm gonna have to wrap this up because we gotta go play some music. We gotta stop talking about music.
Let's do it.
This is really good, by the way.